All right, Mr. Benji, you're in charge. What are we talking about?
Well, um, Victoria, or Quiet One, reminds us that Migrate Drupal is being removed sooner rather than later. Um, and we're not planning to support it in Contrib, if I remember correctly. So again, the plan is that it's being removed in Drupal 11 without being deprecated first in Drupal 10. Am I remembering that correctly?
No, we'll keep it in 11. We're gonna remove it in 12,
Okay.
which is fast. I mean, 11 comes out this year. 12 will be out in 2 years. That will
Yes.
be relatively fast, but 11 will be supported for 4 years, so the code will be there. We don't intend as core maintainers to provide any sort of contrib replacement, but if there's still a need for it in a few years, I'm sure somebody will at least copy the sources around somewhere where they can at least be used by people that know what they're doing. Uh, if it comes up.
So are there particular issues that we hope to get fixed um, before deprecation, before actual removal? What are the things that we care about that really matter to people doing migrations over the next 9 months? Because of course all Drupal 7 sites will be migrated or not by
Right.
January of next year, and that'll be it. What are the things that matter that will help people?
I'm not aware of any migrate Drupal specific high priority issues. I'm sure there are some, especially that are high priority to somebody. Um, but I don't know of any off the top of my head that are outstanding in my brain anyway. The main things to do before 11 comes out is just make sure anything we want to keep in Drupal is that should be in the migrate API module was moved into the migrate API module from the migrate Drupal module, which might include things like, well, yeah, I mean,
The
Drupal
content
SQL.
entity source.
Yeah, the D8 content entity source should probably stay. Um, Drupal SQL base, that can probably go. Um, and then when we deprecate and remove that, of course, we're going to remove um, all of the migrate Drupal stuff that is spread throughout all of the modules. And probably we'll need to do an inventory of maybe process plugins that aren't in the migrate module and see if there are any of those that we want to keep as part of the migrate API. At current, there is not a plan to remove the migrate module from core in 12. Um, I say that with the caveat, though, that that might change over the next 2 years. But at the moment, that's the plan is just to remove the Drupal sources and keep the API in there. Uh, my argument for that is, of course, that it's a module that supports people moving from any sort of a platform onto Drupal, and we should never get rid of anything that makes it remotely easier to get people onto the platform. So I think there's a strategic reason to keep the API in.
I I believe in that argument.
And then, of course, the counter argument is, well, can we just have that in contrib and still have that available? I think there's bits in there that are useful to have. I think having them in core uh, is lets us do a few things we couldn't do in contrib, or at least couldn't do well or easily in contrib. Well, you want to just go down like feature requests or something?
Sure. Let me share my screen. I can find the right window.
But for anybody coming to DrupalCon, we'll have a deeper dive migration maintainer meeting, whatever table Benji and I are sitting at, unless he gets distracted with security stuff, which is very possible.
Okay, do you see the window that I'm scrolling up and down randomly? Did I share the right window?
Yep.
That's a lot of fixed things.
Well, he
Okay,
hasn't set his filters yet.
so it's sorted by last updated, so those will show up. So we want to look at feature requests in the migration system and look at open issues. Um, Dispatch new events while importing data. That does not sound migrate Drupal specific. Save Drupal 7 to 10 upgrade messages in a single log file. Um,
That doesn't have to be upgrade specific. Although, based off of the way it's worded, it probably would be.
well,
And
should we have a closer look or do we not care enough?
I don't, I think it feels very special Snowflake just for that because normally you wouldn't even know, one migration doesn't know about the existence of another.
Yeah, well, if you read you click into it, it's talking about you can read individual. So this isn't even really talking about migrate messages. It's saying you can get messages from the log or from the normal log, but it would be nice to have them all in a single file. And the steps to reduce is do an upgrade, see that the feedback is available in the database log, but you have to look at each thing individually. I mean, that's you can write code for that, custom code, and or you can do a control for that. So I am closed won't fix as far as the Drupal core thing for a module that we are going to be deprecating anyway. Typing it up unless someone says anything.
Yeah, so I'm not excited about that one. You know, would I object if someone implemented it? Would I say no, we're not going to include it?
Yes, I would. In core, I don't think it belongs in core.
So let's not spend time on it now, but maybe I will add a comment after the meeting suggesting that that seems like a won't fix.
Oh, I'm already ahead of you.
Okay.
The next file copy one is actually something that even if we didn't do it for migrate Drupal, I could find some benefit to it. If you notice the name Kamlara, or however you want to pronounce an alias that probably needs a few more vowels, happens to be the maintainer of S3FS,
Yes.
and this would be really nice. I wonder if some of it is already a thing though. With some of the recent file system changes, but I could be wrong.
Yes, I think you're talking about the efforts to make sure that the various ways of uploading a file all go through a single API. So you can upload files through the WYSIWYG when you're uploading an image or a file field or an image field.
No. I was saying when I run a migration, rather than doing file copy and it copies it local to my hard drive on whatever hosting platform I'm using it. It stuffs it directly onto S3. That's kind of what I was thinking. So it goes
Right.
from remote
Well,
to remote.
Right, but you also mentioned the recent changes that have already, so
Oh,
I thought by that you
oh,
meant things that had already go in, and I was trying to,
oh, right. The recent changes with like private files and public files and assets in general.
yeah, it does take streams. That's what I'm understanding. It's saying there's an issue with
Oh,
the
this,
source
this,
stream.
so this sounds like it works if you're putting it into into a directory inside the remote stream, but not if you're copying it into the root directory, whatever you want to call it, of the remote stream. If I read the issue summary correct.
But I don't off the top of my head understand why that would be. I would think that would work.
I think it's
file copy.
if you scroll back up, I think it's because of how it's doing it. It says something about real path is called inside Git directory, and if Git directory is the root, probably the remote stream may not know what to do with that.
Now that I've looked at it with you here, though, I'm not so sure it's as beneficial as I maybe originally thought. Because I typically will go to that remote system and set up S3 command and essentially rsync them up to S3 direct from there. And then I just do file, what is it, the file managed? Like make sure the file managed table in Drupal gets copied over and don't
Anyway,
actually copy files.
yeah, I see what this is. This is definitely assuming that the stream wrapper is going to resolve to a local file. Like I see that in here. So, I mean, file copy kind of intended to copy files into the local file directory, but by the due to the way that it's set up to use streams, like it is very close to working for just any stream wrapper. So this maybe, I think we can leak that. We can call it a feature head or keep it a feature request and not a bug fix, but this should probably just be a general support remote stream wrappers and file copy. And yeah, we should probably just keep it and do it.
but the issue was opened in 2021 and only has one recent comment, so it doesn't look like the sort of thing that a lot of people care a lot about.
Perhaps not, but it's not migrate Drupal specific. That's a process plugin that's in the main migrate module that we plan on keeping around, and remote stream wrappers are getting more and more often used, so no reason to get rid of it.
Yep.
I mean, if you're going to let it copy to remote stream wrappers, it ought to be able to copy at the root as well as down the directory tree.
Yes.
Right. The problem is that the code in there like assumes that stream wrapper is resolving to a local file. Does it?
Yeah.
It pulls it and then runs it through the file system to try and figure out where it's supposed to save it. And there's no reason. I mean, there's no reason why it shouldn't be able to support remote stream wrappers. So I think I'm going to just rename this to fully support.
The optimize migration of specific source IDs is a common request. I'm not sure I've always ever really supported it though. So
Oh, and
maybe
Mauricio has
some,
joined us. Hi, Mauricio. I saw your announcement about some new documentation.
Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Hi, everyone.
Yes, was this one where when you say a particular ID list, it still has to loop through the source one at a time?
I support this one, but I have not found a way to implement it in core where it makes sense. The latest attempt that I saw was trying to access, members that Migrate Plus, Migrate Tools tack on, which just doesn't going to work. Like it needs to do it. It kind of because nothing in core supports the ability to do that right now, and so like it really needs an interface and like it needs a reason to do it in core. And the tricky part is, of course, there isn't. This is something you want to do with Drush migrations when you're using Migrate Plus and all of this other stuff. But there's no good way for Migrate Plus to inject the necessary things in there, short of very complicated SQL alters that are not very stable and liable to break easily. So I do support like having that in the SQL base plugin.
this is in the map plugin,
Well,
or is
it
this
would
the
be
source?
it would be used in the SQL based source plugin primarily.
Now, is
But
the SQL base going away or sticking around?
well, SQL base is staying. Drupal SQL base will probably be going, but
Okay.
SQL base will stay. So like you said, I support supporting this in SQL base. I just there's no interface, either a UI or like a PHP interface that would provide any means to use it. And we, except for the ones that kind of exist in Migrate Tools and Migrate Plus. So I have not seen, a good
Well,
way
Drush
to implement it.
also does this, I think. So
Well, that might give us more of a reason to do it in a way without providing an actual interface to it in core, because now it's supported by Core Drush, which is, the official Drush support and not just the Drush commands in Migrate Tools.
I think, yeah, I'm not as opposed to it from like the conceptual. It's more of every implementation seems to be wanting to use reflection or some other crazy thing to actually make it work.
Well, using reflection basically means accessing non-public properties, which is a workaround for something that wasn't designed to support what you're trying to do, right?
When I say that, I don't actually know if they actually did reflection or not. It's more just the general, it's a messy little thing that people have tried to hack together a solution that tends to work for them, but not generally speaking for anyone besides their special project. It's a hard problem.
Yeah, maybe I just need to take another look over this and see if there's a way. But
All you got to do is modify the SQL query to limit it to your 3 records.
right, but the issue is how do you get the information of those records into the source? It doesn't make a ton of sense because all the source gets is its configuration, and so it doesn't make any sense to put IDs in there, because then migration you'd have to hard code them into the migration or do it all. Like there's it just it would work, and Migrate Plus could do a migration alter to make it work, but it feels really weird to put those in the configuration. And there's really no other mechanism to provide information to the source that, we want to do this. And so,
No, the query method is public, isn't it? So we could add optional parameter to the query method and use that to pass the IDs.
yeah, but it's not called externally. It's called in the initialized iterator. So you're still looking at any plugin that extends it having to modify their initialized iterator to make use of it.
Mhm.
That's the problem, is like we want to do it once in a base plugin and have it just work for anything that's already extending it. I mean, because otherwise Migrate Plus could come up with their own SQL-based plugin that did it. The problem is nothing, Node and taxonomy turn, none of those would extend the Migrate Plus version. They all extend the core ones. So the goal is to make it self-contained in that SQL-based plugin, and then just have it work without any of the without any of the extensions needing to do anything. And it's just tricky because there's no place to inject those IDs into a source plugin at the moment. So we'd have to create one. Like there'd have to be something in the executable import that, takes an extra argument of IDs, and then you'd have to build support for it back to the point where you're trying to run the migration. And we don't have anything like that. And it adds, some mess to the function calls. And so I've never seen a solution that I liked. And again, the latest one here, if I recall correctly, just uses some Migrate Plus trickery that is it because of their execute. I don't remember exactly the details, but they inject this ID list parameter in there somehow as either non-declared or something, and it's just not going to fly in core to work off of that parameter. So that's where I get stuck, is like it's got to get supported back to the point where migrate us, where you're calling executable import, you need to be able to call executable import and give it an array of IDs or something like that. And that's kind of a big thing to add in there, and then support that all the way up the chain. So keep the issue around. If I see a way to do it, or if someone suggests a way to do it that works and isn't hacky, we'll do it. But I don't have a solution for it right now.
Here under related issues is another one that I think we should try to push through. I haven't looked at it in a long time, and it's marked needs work. SQL source plugins allow defining conditions and join in the migration YAML. I think we agree that this is worth doing, right?
Last I remember, it got stuck on semantics around prepare query and count query and all of this stuff on how to get the modifications to work correctly with the count. Because the way it was done, it was injecting all of those in the prepare query method, which currently isn't called before the count query is retrieved, which means the counts are always off every time we did it. But if we call prepare query in the count query, then there's suddenly no reason. The whole point of prepare query was to have stuff in there that we wanted on the query itself, but not the count query, like tags and such. And so if we call that on the count query, then there's not much point in having the prepare query. And so it just got ugly. I remember having a conversation on it and just kind of dying. I feel like I commented on a path forward that was probably a little complicated, but at least it made sense to me as far as where we should end up, and I don't think we ever ended up really doing it. Because it would also involve deprecations and a fair amount of rework and stuff.
That's right. We were talking about that not long ago. What was the context there? Prepare query, count
You
query.
click into that issue, the 2833060. I did one of my epic novels in comment 46 and pretty much died after. A lot of issues die after I post novels on them. I don't remember what I wrote. We can all find out together. I don't even know if I understand what I wrote. I might have to go read back for some more context. But yeah, that sounds like me. Just a lot of talk about VC breaks and all the stuff that needs to happen.
So were we talking about this in the context of the throwing exceptions for versus keeping track on the row of whether to skip a row? Was that somehow tied into this?
No,
Okay.
no, this is a different thing.
Any other issues here that people want to talk about? Or anything?
Well, 3202462, that postponed one about mapping formatter and widget plugin IDs. That's a wonderful idea, but it's never going to happen. Like, I
Which
think
one is this?
oh, I don't know. It's just the next one after whatever the last one was we looked at. Syncing.
This one?
Yeah. That one seems like a good idea, but I don't see it happening, with deprecation. I mean, we're going to be deprecating that stuff soon. See, I think a lot of these migrate Drupal specific ones are just too late. They're kind of nice to have, but I think we're just past the point where anybody's going to put the effort into them and they'd be useful. Be the type of things that would have been great 6 years ago. Unset empty migrate row.
So maybe it would be more useful, more fun to talk about something else instead of talking about what's going away. Um, what what changes do we want to make that will be around for a long time, that will be useful?
Do you have something in your head? Are you thinking of something?
Well, there are a couple of issues in Migrate Plus, which is I think where most feature requests belong. So, for example, I almost didn't notice, but we got the ability to share configuration in a recent version of Migrate Tools, was it? Lucas, do you remember?
It is tools. That's where we landed that.
Yeah,
I'm using it on a project right now
I'm using it too.
with YAML aliases, no less.
Ooh, I'm
Or
not using
anchors.
YAML
Yeah,
aliases.
YAML anchors.
Ah, you're fancier than I am. But
Mm.
a simple application is that every node type that we're migrating from Drupal 7 has all of these base fields that, you don't want to have to worry about. So there's the status, the changed, there's sticky and promoted. So you can just once in your shared configuration file, say this is how you handle the node base fields, and then you can include that in each of your node migrations. And
It will work with YAML plugin based and config migrate plus config migrations. Both.
right. Yeah, it works with core and with Migrate Plus migrations. And Mauricio posted something in the chat, the Migrate Wizard project. Well, this sounds like a pretty big promise. Our module provides a user-friendly solution for seamless content migration. With a user-friendly admin interface, support for various content types. On the other hand, it only has an alpha 1 release. So, Mauricio, do you know anything more about it than the fact that it exists?
No, it depends on the Migrate API and Migrate Tools and Migrate Plus, but other than that, I just saw it yesterday, I think.
You might try it on a new project just to see what it does.
Mhm.
Just it can't hurt.
Yep.
But anyway, with shared configuration, that reduces a lot of the duplication in custom migration projects. And I wonder, is there still a place for the snippet plugin that I proposed a while ago, which lets you reuse a pipeline, basically?
I've been using that. Previously misused the migration group functionality to reuse, like to do what we're talking about, but not anymore. But anyway, yeah, I've been using the snippet thing. I haven't checked out the new functionality you're talking about for reusing.
Yeah, so I think there probably is still a place for snippets. For example, if you have some specific pipeline that you want to apply to a bunch of text fields, you can define that once as a snippet and then reuse it in various places. And I don't think you can do that with shared configuration, unless maybe Lucas, you're more clever with that than I am. But if you have two different fields that want to apply the same pipeline, I don't see how to do that with shared configuration.
Well, Sort of. I can show you a shared config where it works.
Oh, I'd like to see that.
Um, share screen. Um, so like this right here, I have it multiple times. It's the little asterisk in front of it. And I keep coming back up here, and then the ampersand is the actual definition of it.
And this is in your shared configuration file? Yes, it is.
Yeah,
And these are the YAML anchors you were talking about.
yep. So you do the ampersand, and it puts a name for the thing. And then whenever you want to use it, you use an asterisk. And I picked this up actually from Gabe Sluice. So this one's not very long. It's only three long. But what it lets me do then is everywhere I want to do that same 3 lines plus whatever is 15 lines, I just copy this. You'll see the same with like plain text headline. This is a fairly long, complex thing. And then down here, very simple.
So I'm seeing you do the search and replace, like a similar non-breaking space search and replace on a couple text fields. Theoretically, could you do that with a, I'm not saying that it's necessarily worth it here, but is that a, could you do a similar thing?
Good. This also lets you insert this series of things straight in as a process right into the base level. So all the values below here. So I don't have to replace, I don't have to copy this whole thing all over the place. So it's all in I guess all in the, I've read it before. Gabe started to throw it in there and it reminded me, I read about it. It's in the YAML definition.
Yeah. But does that work across files? Like, can you define a pipeline in your shared configuration and then use it on different fields in the individual migration files?
I'm not sure if it would or not. I have a feeling it would. It would because the way it's implemented is it, I believe, pulls in everything together. But let me see.
I wouldn't think so. I thought shared condition, I thought we converted everything into arrays and then merged shared configuration into the arrays.
Yeah,
It all happens after the YAML processing. So I don't think that would go cross files.
No, it doesn't.
I don't know. I haven't felt much of the need to use that. There's a trade-off between readability and condensed amount of text. And I don't usually find myself where I'm putting a block like that in that I then need to go change the block everywhere.
I've got like 40 component blocks that are all like group block content blocks. All 40 of them are all variations off of, I mean, sort of there's a lot of similarities across them where they all have headlines on like 15 of them. And so there's a fair amount of consistency we want to keep. And what we found without the anchors is that we would fix it in one place and miss or fix it in 13 of the places, but forget it in 2 places. Which is kind of why we fell back on this.
That's the basic reason for the dry principle. Don't repeat yourself.
But yeah, in general, I tend to go for verbosity over, unless there's another reason. Like my variable names are fully spelled out here. No acronyms for me.
So you always write out Perl compatible regular expression instead of PCRE.
I will sometimes break the rule and call it regex, but I might also call it regular expression. And I will be the first to say I'm not always consistent.
That's good, because we all know that a foolish consistency is the hobgoblin of little minds. One of the most misquoted lines in literature.
Well, I think we're coming up to the end of our hour. I look forward to seeing anybody who's going to be at DrupalCon. Come join us in Contrib space.
And I guess that will overlap with our scheduled next regular Slack meeting. So I guess I have to think about whether I want to run that meeting over Slack from DrupalCon or whether we'll just skip it.
Let's do it in person. Next meeting's in person in Portland.
Sounds good to me. Oh, actually, one thing before we start signing off, I want to take a screenshot of the participants window so that I can give issue credit for the people who attended the meeting. Okay.
I just had a small thing that I don't know that might be useful to discuss.
Yeah.
So I was working on a migration that needed to migrate content into existing nodes that had not been created by that migration.
Mhm.
And there is a way to do that, but what happens is the reporting is slightly off because it sees those new entries as creating new nodes, even though they're updating new nodes. So you'll see something like 900 created when maybe 800 of them are updates and 100 were created. And I think the explanation was just that
You're done. It's not talking about the entities. The migration system is agnostic to your destination. It could be entities, it could be a remote API, it could be any sort of thing. It means you've created new map records and updated map records.
that's right. That's right. It's
Yeah.
more the map records that are being created rather than an entity being created.
Right.
So I just wondered if there was any way to, I don't know, define that more explicitly somewhere or point out that that's happening.
I have done things before where if I knew what the source ID was and I knew what it mapped to, I just created a whole bunch of map table entries for it ahead of time programmatically.
Oh, interesting. Interesting. Just update the map table before running the migration.
Yeah, and then it'll just it'll treat them as updates.
Yeah, I guess my concern is just that looking at that information, it's hard to tell which ones were updated versus created. So that would be a useful path forward. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, unfortunately, what the destination plugin does with the data is, or the migration system that is running it is completely agnostic. It has no clue what the destination plugin is doing with the data. It doesn't care whether the destination plugin is creating or updating an entity or anything like that. And it might not, it could be doing anything with the data. So there's not really It's not really a way to get that concept of created, updated out of a destination plugin in some format that would make sense for every possible use of a destination plugin. Because it's just not consistent. And the migration itself has doesn't know at all whether it's updating an entity, creating an entity, sending data out to a remote API or whatever. That information never makes it back to the executable that's reporting. All the executable can report is whether you created new map table entries or not.
Yeah.
Well, the destination plugin could
It-
give some sort of additional feedback. Like this would not be a small change.
Yeah, because right now the destination plugin just returns the destination ID once it has one, right?
Right.
I've written custom destinations. Not regularly, but if it's important, it's not that hard to extend. And
But what
Maybe.
I'm suggesting is that it, the destination plugin generates some feedback and gives it back to the migrate executable. So we'd also have to update the executable to do something with that feedback,
Right.
which is why
I
I
don't
say it
know
would
that we
be a
could,
small change.
predict the format of the information, but
Well, we'd specify it in the API.
right. I'm just saying, like, if you're specifically talking create update, that doesn't necessarily make sense for all destinations. If you're thinking of migrate as a full-on API and outside of the popular use case of using it to create entities, it really only makes sense in the sense of entities. And I really just don't.
No, I think
Like, it would only make sense as if you added that feedback to like entity content base and entity config base and like the executable check to see if the destination plugin was one of those, and then did something extra. I'm not a huge fan of adding that kind
Lucas
of
maintains
complexity
a
in there.
module that uses the Migrate API to send data from Drupal to QuickBooks. And that would be another use case where it does make sense to say created or updated. We could define an interface that a destination plugin could implement and then check, does it implement this interface? If so, we do something with this feedback it generates.
Somebody code it up. I'll look. Maybe I'll change my mind.
I'm smirking. I don't.
Because you will.
I don't consider that module a joy to work with,
No.
and I did not come up with the envisionment for it.
With that chicks?
Yep.
Honestly, I would. I know it doesn't help, but like my preference would be to in Drush specify that we are talking about map entries that have been created and not entities, so that people understand or are more likely to understand that we're not talking about entities than I would be to try and implement a feedback system that would make sense.
Yeah, that's more along the lines of what I was thinking also. Just document somewhere that that's
Right.
what's happening. Oh.
A destination might not even know if it's creating or inserting an entry. It might use an upsert, it might use a remote API and to post something and not necessarily know if it's doing an update or creating something new. I feel like it'd be a lot of code that you have to work around if you didn't want it. It could be something, I mean, well, no, because you still need to do it in the destination. I don't know. Like I said, if someone finds a way to do it that makes sense and just isn't a whole lot of crap to have to get maintained that's going to get in the way of adding other features, I'd be happy to take a look at it. All right, I got a duck.
Yep. It's getting close to
See
supper time here.
Some of you in Portland in a couple of weeks, and
Yep.
the rest of you back in Zoom in 3 months.
3 months? Oh, Zoom in 3 months, yes. And on Slack before then.
Hopefully. All right, all.
Bye-bye.
Take care. See you next time.
Thank you.
Bye.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks.